In this video, I'm going to do an analysis of the Science Chem practical exam for 2023 as requested by many of you. Now, I know I caused a bit of controversy when earlier in my previous video, I mentioned that the pure chem paper cannot get any easier than that because the paper was actually a bit tricky. But for the Science Chem paper, I mean it from the bottom of my heart that it really cannot get any easier than this. So in the Science Chem paper, there were 3 mini experiments plus a mini planning question. In the first experiment, you're required to heat a solid strongly. When you heat a solid strongly, again, the 2 things that can happen is that if there is water of crystallization is going to come off and is going to condense near the mouth of your test tube. The second thing that can happen is that your solid will decompose or get broken down into simpler substances. So for those of you who did the heating correctly, I'm sure you would have observed some colorless liquid forming at the mouth of your test tube. That is your water of crystallization. You should have observed that the solid turned from white to yellow on heating as well. Most likely, the solid that you are heating is zinc carbonate. Zinc carbonate upon decomposition will give you zinc oxide, and the unique thing about zinc oxide is that it's yellow when hot and white when cool. So the last observation that you should expect is that when you cool it down, the solid turns back to white. The second mini experiment involves adding acid to your solid A, and you're required to test for a gas by bubbling it into lime water. And the fact that you're going to bubble a gas into lime water, it should scream at you that you're testing for carbon dioxide, and since there's only one test, it has to be positive for you to make any conclusions, any meaningful conclusions. So if you have done it correctly, you should see a white PPT forming in your lime water, and the conclusion that you can make, for the question they didn't specify what type of conclusions must you make. So I believe that if you have written down CO2 produced, that would have given you that 1 mark already. A secondary conclusion would be that A then is a metal carbonate. For those of you who are not familiar with using plastic dropper to test for carbon dioxide, I will drop a link in the description. You can take a look at the video of how actually to test for carbon dioxide using a plastic dropper. The last mini experiment is a qualitative analysis on 2 unknown solutions, solution B, which is colorless, and solution C, which is blue. By this time, when you see a blue solution, you should be mentally prepared that it contains copper 2 ions, meaning there will be certain observations that will be expected, especially when you look at the reagents that you're going to add to test for the ions in B and C. So by now, you should be very familiar. In test part 1, when you add barium nitrate, you are testing for sulfate, the presence of sulfate ions. Silver nitrate, the presence for chloride ions or iodide ions. Aqueous ammonia and aqueous sodium hydroxide is to identify the cation present. So for those of you, again, if you have done it correctly, in part 1, you should find a white PPT forming in C, but not in B. For part 2, you should see a white PPT forming in B, but not in C. For part 3 and 4, for solution C, this one it should be expected because from the blue solution, you would expect that copper is present. So in aqueous ammonia, you will see a light blue PPT, soluble in excess to give a dark blue solution. In sodium hydroxide, you would only see a light blue PPT, insoluble in excess. For the cation in B, that one you need to really carry out. If you add aqueous ammonia, you shouldn't have seen any PPT. That is a giveaway. And then when you add sodium hydroxide, you should see a white PPT, insoluble in excess. And that, with the 2 observations, you should be able to conclude then that B contains calcium ions and chloride ions, and C contains copper 2 ions and sulfate ions. Since the question requires you to identify only, you may write the formula or you may write the name. But be careful when you're writing the name. Why is that so? For example, if you are writing the name of your ion, you will need to write copper bracket 2 ion. Okay, because copper ion is ambiguous. It can be copper 1, it can be copper 2. So you need to write copper bracket 2 ion. Also for chlorine or chloride ion, make sure that you have written down as chloride, because if you have written chlorine ion, this is not correct, because chlorine represents the atom or the element. So that is ambiguous. Make sure that you have spelled correctly chloride. The last part of the practical exam is a mini planning question. They tell you that they have added C. We have already identified C to be copper 2 sulfate plus potassium iodide, and then you get a solid and a liquid. Now for this part, there's no need for you to know what kind of reaction is that, what are the products of the reaction. The only thing you need to know is that you have a solid plus a liquid. And the question is asking you how to separate a solid and a liquid. So from your knowledge of methods of separation, this is the easiest of methods. You have to perform a filtration. So you need to draw a setup for filtration, and in your setup you can show that the solid is then collected as the residue, your liquid is collected in the filtrate. Do remember to label your apparatus clearly as to what you need in the setup for filtration. Description, I think, is largely covered in the diagram. All you need to say is then to pour the mixture through the filter paper, and if you want to, you can say that then the solid is collected in the residue, the liquid is collected in the filtrate. So as mentioned, this practical exam is pretty straightforward. I believe if you have practiced well enough, it should be, you should be doing well in this practical exam.